Hello, everyone. My name is Nicholas Lamar Soutter. Welcome to Overtime. The Supreme Court today, U.S. Supreme Court, has voted to overturn Roe v. Wade and thus ending the concept of a constitutional right to an abortion. Now, I would like to point out that this is actually the decision is based very closely to the original Alito leak that we reported on. And when that happened, we had gone over that leak and suggested that the challenge to Roe v. Wade was actually probably the single most serious of the immediate consequences, but not the most, not the entirety of what this decision was intended to do. This decision is, in fact, a deliberate attempt to overturn all of the progressive legislation that has passed and the progressive rulings in the U.S. court system for the last 50 years. Now, we have already discussed how and why, and I'm sure we're going to end up discussing it again. But I urge you to realize that this actually has reasonably little to do with Roe v. Wade. And if you are upset by this, realize that this is just the beginning. We already know this. We've already said how we know this. And as if to prove the point, Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas has come out in his own concurrent opinion and has said that he believes that it is now time to, so stand by one, that he believes it is now time to look at everything from gay marriage to contraception to even the right to same-sex relationships. I say this again, same-sex relationships. The reason is because all of these are pinned under the due process or right to privacy elements of the Constitution, which this court is saying no longer grants the non-enumerated rights such as Roe v. Wade, so right to an abortion, right to marry who you choose, so on and so forth. None of these rights are guaranteed by the Constitution any longer. They haven't all been overturned. The only one that's been overturned so far is Roe v. Wade. All of them are on the table. We said that. We said that when the Alito decision was first leaked, and now Thomas has all but said that is exactly what he intends to do. Alito has already said that this is what he intends to do. His dissent on the gay marriage issue was using this exact reasoning that's in the Roe v. Wade. So already Thomas and Alito have said that they intend to overturn gay marriage. Alito hasn't said much on the other ones. We do know they've already essentially gutted the SEC. They have pulled the teeth of the SEC, an organization which unfortunately was unable to prevent the 2007-2008 economic collapse in the U.S. and really, admittedly, issues, but without them, we are going to suffer another worse collapse in the future. They have had their teeth completely pulled. By not dissimilar reasoning, the Environmental Protection Agency is expected to have its teeth pulled probably maybe today. The ruling was expected already and hasn't come yet, but it's going to be along the same lines. And essentially, what we expect the court to say at this point is that the Environmental Protection Agency cannot enforce most of its policies. Think about that for a minute. The Environmental Protection Agency cannot enforce most of its policies. That is almost certainly going to be the decision of the Supreme Court. It's going to be following the SEC ruling, and it's going to be following what they've already told us they're going to do. So at this point, we are looking at the collapse of the SEC, the collapse of the EPA, and the organizations will still be there, but they can't enforce anything. Roe v. Wade is now gone. And on the chopping block is Maranda. That is your the requirement that you be informed of your rights when you are arrested. Now, keep in mind, when we say Roe v. Wade is gone, what's been lost is your right to have an abortion. The individual states may still recognize or prohibit it. At this point, we believe 26 states, is it 26? 20 states are going to ban abortion. A few are probably banned as of this moment. They had trigger laws. The second Roe v. Wade fell, abortions would be banned. So if I last count, I believe there was 18 trigger states. This would make abortion now officially illegal in 18 states. And again, this is the beginning. And it is distressing. It's distressing either way to watch all of these things that I think I was proud of as an American. We weren't cutting edge in terms of our values and the values that we give to our citizens by any stretch of the imagination, but at least we were an industrialized country with modern values, and all of that is on the table. What I'd like to do is to read. Okay, so Clarence Thomas wrote a concurrent opinion. Now, the reason he wrote a concurrent opinion was because he believed that Alito's opinion, which is prepared and set up a roadmap, set up a way to undermine every single piece of progressive legislation and progressive decision that's happened over the last 50 years. We've discussed this. He felt it wasn't clear enough. So Thomas wrote his own concurrent opinion, and in that opinion he wrote that, quote, in future cases, we should reconsider all of the court's substantive due process precedents, including Griswold, Lawrence, and Obergefell, because any substantive due process decision is demonstrably erroneous. Again, that is the precedent that Alito set up. Now, he said that he did not want... He tried to, talk out of both sides of his mouth. The decision said that this should not apply, the decision should not apply to anything outside the right to an abortion, and then he properly set up how many was it? Like 28, 29? No, actually, sorry, it was 58 or 59 pages of how this applies to absolutely all due process and privacy issues. So Thomas is running with it, which is what it was designed to do, despite the 2 paragraphs in the entire decision that said you can't do this. It was cute the way it was worded. Basically, this is not precedent for those issues. So presumably lawyers can't argue, well, in Roe v. Wade you decided this. But it's still a roadmap for how to make the same decision with these other cases, which is exactly what Thomas is suggesting here. So in his concurrent opinion, any substantive due process decision is demonstrably erroneous. That includes your right to an attorney. That includes the right to Miranda warnings. That includes the right to birth control. That includes the right to same-sex marriage. That includes the right to actually have same-sex relations with another consenting adult. All of those are now on the table. Jim Obergefell, one of the plaintiffs in Obergefell v. Hodge, has said that Thomas is not, quote, the supreme deity. Quote, Clarence Thomas is a Supreme Court justice appointed by humans. He is not the supreme deity. The millions of loving couples who have the right to marriage equality to form their own families do not need Clarence Thomas's imposing his individual twisted morality on them. If you want to see an error in judgment, Clarence Thomas, look in the mirror. This is really quite stunning. We knew that Roe v. Wade was going to fall. We knew this as a result of the leaked decision. It was, from what I can tell, it was unclear on what I've read. I've tried to follow up on this as to how Chief Justice Roberts voted. The only thing I've seen is he did not vote with the majority. What does that mean? Does that mean he abstained, or does that mean he voted with the minority? It could mean either of those two. Last we heard, he had abstained. He did not vote in this. It doesn't matter. If he voted with the minority, it would pass 5-4. If he did not vote with the minority, it would pass 5-3. So it honestly does not matter, but my understanding last I heard was that he had not actually voted on this. We've had it confirmed from several sources that he did not vote with the majority, but we don't know what that means. So, yeah. It's a little hard. I talk a lot, and I'm good at it. It's shutting me up that's the trick. This seems to have done it. I don't want to detract from the anger that a very large percentage of the American population is feeling today. But I want to emphasize this is the beginning. This is the beginning of an assault on every single piece of progressive legislation, including voting rights. What do you think is the possibility of overturning this when they start going after voting rights? And they're going to. We've already discussed what happened with Border Patrol. SCOTUS seems dead set on limiting federal government and also making it impossible so that federal government, so they can't abuse their authority, presumably, but then also making it impossible for you to respond when they abuse their authority. That was the decision in the Border Guard case, and we've already also covered that. That's in our archives. We'll have to have sometime when we're not doing breaking news, we can go into it. But long story short, it has dramatically limited people's ability to sue specifically Border Guard agents on the grounds that they represent national security. But once again, the way that was set up, it can apply to any federal agent. If a federal agent violates your rights, you do not have recourse to sue. Now, their argument is you should have a recourse of some kind, but it's up to Congress to decide what that is. That is the most narrow interpretation of the Constitution I've ever seen. It is indefensibly narrow. If you can't go to the courts, where can you go to? What happens when Congress doesn't legislate this? Because they're deadlocked on everything. They can't even, they are having difficulties passing debt ceiling raises when that's the cost of doing business. Literally, they have to do that all the time, and that has become a football. They're gonna pick up the slack on all of these things? No. This is the culmination and ultimate success of Mitch McConnell, who, whether he engineered it or not, was certainly the grand implementer, shall we say, of the attempt to do all of these things by establishing a conservative majority U.S. Supreme Court. He was successful in denying Obama his nomination. Gorsuch, and I'm sorry, but it wasn't Gorsuch, it was Merrick Garland. Gorsuch was, he denied him Merrick Garland, and at this point, the conservative majority is steamrolling the liberal minority, and there's some of that all the time. A majority always does wield the majority power. There's nothing you can do about that. Our Constitution was set up in a way to attempt to limit that. But nonetheless, this amount of he's packed the court successfully, and there's been talk of adding 2 new justices to unpack the court. I'm not a huge fan of that. I'm not a huge fan of at this point. I think for those of you who are looking for some solace other than getting as politically active as you can, because even if, let's assume for a minute, you are pro-life, if you are also at least for the right to marry who you choose, you need to be politically active. If you are a fan of the right to an attorney, you need to get politically active because that is on the chopping block. If you think that women should at least have the right to birth control, maybe not to an abortion, but to birth control, which is the only thing that allowed women's, not the only thing, that's hyperbole, but it is the single most important thing that granted women the freedoms that men enjoy, because men do not have a biological impediment in this case. If a woman gets pregnant, she will have some limitations going forward. You cannot get around that. birth control freed women from essentially slavery. There's a great deal of political work that had to be done. I don't want to say it was all birth control, but it couldn't have been done without birth control. It is the empowerment of 50% of our species. I'm aware of the argument, and it's not actually a bad argument as to why things like this shouldn't be permitted. And the argument is essentially that it's not up to the courts, it should be up to the states, and or it should have gone through legislation and all these other things. The problem is it hasn't and it won't. The problem is we still should have these rights, and the whole point of this branch of government is to be able to balance this kind of thing. And when you have a Congress that is dysfunctional and isn't going to grant these rights, you don't take them away and just say, well, eventually Congress will get around to making sure that your constitutional rights are enforced. These are no longer constitutional rights, according to them, and won't be until Congress moves on it, and you and I know they won't. This is the first step in knocking back American culture to the Stone Age. I'm not kidding. It's not hyperbole. You think this is about Roe v. Wade, I wish it were. It wouldn't be a tenth as bad. At any rate, for those of you just joining us, Roe v. Wade is now over. The U.S. no longer recognizes a right to an abortion, which is, by the way, a human right, according to the United Nations. In a concurrent opinion, Clarence Thomas has written that we should redress any and all decisions that were based on due process and or essentially privacy. They're intertwined in this particular setup, and has said that this means that we should address things like Griswold, Lawrence, Obergefell, and any other due process. This includes, again, Miranda. This includes, even as I said, it's not just. And when this happened, I remember having the discussion with the live chat about whether or not they would go so far as to actually same-sex relationships. I explained quite clearly that the Alito decision was irrefutably, you cannot argue this, it was designed, if you understand how to read these things, if you've read them before, it was designed to overturn all of this legislation up through and including trans rights, gay marriage, all of it. They would go for same-sex relationships. I didn't think they would go for that because I thought that putting that on the table would be a bridge too far, especially by Clarence Thomas, who, by the way, is married to a white woman. He is a black man married to a white woman. That is now on the table. It's on the table. I find it interesting that he explicitly said same-sex relationships need to be addressed, but he didn't mention interracial relationships, which is the same fucking principle. For those of you looking for hope, we may find it in Ginny Thomas. I think it's highly likely Ginny Thomas broke the law. I think it's highly likely that I think it's more likely than not he knew that she was going to be in the Eastman documents when he stayed on. He refused to recuse himself and then voted against releasing those documents. I think it's a greater than not likelihood. I beyond a reasonable doubt, no, but I think it would pass muster in a civil case. Having said that, it doesn't matter. He has clearly not recused himself from cases from which he should have. And so I think there's a possibility Clarence Thomas is gone. If Clarence Thomas is gone, who the hell knows? Does Biden get a pick? Obama didn't get one. This makes Mitch McConnell A, phenomenally fucking evil, and B, and everybody knows what he did violated the Constitution. Everybody knows it. That was why I remember that one too. I don't mean to sit and toot my own horn. I've been doing a lot of that, I suppose, but I remember tweeting at Obama every single day over the Merrick Garland thing. I had an interpretation of the Constitution. Silence implies consent. All he needed was the consent of Congress? I forget what it was, but it was worded in such a way he could absolutely, doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. It was a lost opportunity. And at this point, liberals and the entire liberal agenda, which some of which isn't a good agenda, by the way. I have my own objections, and I've made them well known on this show to the far left. And I, to some unfortunately personal loss, willing to take it because I think the far left is a problem. But right now, we're not even close to the problem of what is called the moderate right. I'm telling you now, this is an assault on all progressive values. And I'm saying this because that cannot be stressed enough. And it's not an assault on all progressive values because Roe v. Wade has fallen. That's not why. It's because the court has clearly said that that precedent applies to everything we've won in the last 50 years. And when I say we, I mean this country. I don't mean progressives. I mean this country. I live in Massachusetts. I'm proud of the fact that was the first state to legalize gay marriage. It was the first state to legalize. 100 years from now, that anybody could say that you can't have gay marriage, that is going to be seen as barbaric as slavery. And I'm sorry if there are conservatives who don't understand that. They are wrong in this. I don't need an ethics course to know that. I need history. Read history. It's wrong. Period. I really wish conservatives would stop making me ashamed of my fucking country. It'd be nice if we tried a little harder. All right, I'm going to go check the live chat. And then I think we're going to call it a show. We're as informed as you can be at this point. This is all breaking news. We do know that Biden has said he's going to address the country tonight. I have a concern about that, which is I don't want him to inflame things in such a way that, it leads to violence. I'm still have my principles and my values on that. Having said that, there need to be mass protests. There need to be people walking out of work. I think women need to, but this is said as a joke. This has to no longer be a joke. Listen, if you can't have birth control, women should just stop having sex. Period. Start with that position. It isn't going to affect Clarence Thomas because who knows why. I don't know what his excuse is. But that's where we stand. All right, I'm going to check the live chat. All right. Same-sex relationships, again, and it's not even the... Here's the problem, which is presumably any relationship would fall under right to privacy. I don't even know that the right to marry is in the Constitution. I don't think it is. So what they don't realize is they're undermining all of that. They just sort of think that that's where it stops, and that is where it's going to stop because it's the conservatives controlling where it stops. But there's no right to opposite-sex marriage in the Constitution. So what's the difference? The difference only appears to be that for some reason they think... Now, Alito made this argument. It was the most narrow interpretation. Well, marriage is a tradition in the U.S., people getting married. Well, yes, it is. But choosing who you marry is a tradition in the U.S. We're one of the few countries that do it, actually. It's reasonably acceptable. A lot of European countries, obviously, but, there are more than, 2/3 of the human beings on this planet don't get to choose who they marry? Think about that for a minute. That's the tradition. Not that you marry Jesus. Geostrubber, so they might try to outlaw the relationships themselves. I doubt the Supreme Court will go that way. The Supreme Court will, I guarantee it, try to outlaw abortion. They couldn't do it in this decision, but Texas will bring a decision. By the way, abortion is now illegal in Texas. There's a trigger law. Abortion is now completely illegal in Texas. I believe it is actually probably in 13 states as of this moment. It will be in, we believe, 29 states within probably by the end of the year. So they will try to outlaw that. I don't think they're going to try to outlaw same-sex marriage or same-sex relationships, but they will leave that up to the states and or Congress. And when Congress refuses to act, they'll blame Congress. But it's sort of like, well, then why'd you undo it, knowing that Congress is going to... I understand that there's a decent legal reasoning. As a guy who got his BA in philosophy, I understand the arguments that they're making, and some of them aren't particularly bad arguments. The problem is they're not practical, and the reason they're not practical is because there are stopgaps until Congress actually legislates these things, which they're not doing, and they're not going to do. There's no hope that Congress is going to unfuck itself anytime in the near future. All right, so Missouri has already signed their trigger ban into effect, so it is officially legal in Missouri. I would imagine it is in Texas, but we now know. The EPA is going to be gone. Let's see. Germania, when they take away the rights of women, who else's rights will they be going? Well, trans, gay, and eventually, everybody. This is functionally war against everybody the GOP doesn't like. To some extent, yeah. By the way, I mean, it's Massachusetts has fewer gun deaths than most states. We have stronger gun laws than most states. Oh my God, it actually seems to work. But the New York decision, which happened on, I think it was Tuesday, makes it virtually impossible to do any kind of restrictions in the states. So, this is pick a progressive agenda item. It has suffered a massive blow this week. Any item, whether it's gun control, gay marriage, right to privacy, pick one. And this is the start, folks. This is the start. It's not... I don't know how to, and the reason I keep saying this, I know I sound like a broken record, but I've been saying it on Twitter. I've been saying it everywhere. People are like, yeah, well, whatever. It's like, no. You need to know how to read these things. Anyways, let's see. Can Biden flood SCOTUS? 9 isn't a set number. Correct. He can appoint others. I think he needs congressional oversight to do it. I forget what the process is. It's been a while since I've looked at it. There are a lot of things very distasteful about doing that. 9 is probably too small a number. That is true. I'm against packing the court, and him adding 2 to unpack it. At least he's not packing it, presumably. But, I will point out that when liberals get into power, and when liberals have the executive branch and they're putting people to the Supreme Court, they tend to pick reasonably moderate judges. They're left-leaning, of course, but they're not far-left activist judges. The right doesn't do that. So when the right has all these complaints about activist judges and all the things that are going wrong, keep in mind the right seems to be much more willing to make dramatic changes to precedent and how we've been operating as a society. Yeah, the left is certainly does it, but it's a lot slower, and it's not hugely radical and activist. The closest last one that I can think of was Obamacare, and I understand why that pissed people off, but Jesus, there are ways to have a conversation about that, not to undo the whole fucking thing. Um, yeah. I find it odd too. Okay, well, so the argument is that if you outlaw guns, people will still use them in crimes. Guess what happens if you outlaw abortion? People still going to have abortions. So why does the argument work in one case and not the other? Yeah, this was. I'm gonna be honest. I think Nate deserves props on this one. We had on Nate the lawyer to discuss this. I think it was Nate, Vox, and myself. And Vox knows the Supreme Court better than anybody we've ever had on, I think. Or even Vox said, yeah, they'll knock it back a bit, but not fully. And Nate was like, no, they're going to take it out. Wish he was wrong. Wish I had been wrong. I was wrong about my prediction that they'd knock it out completely, but I'm right in my read of what they're doing now. Absolutely right. I wish I wasn't. Miranda's already up. Miranda is going to go. I mean, this is going to knock us back at least 50 years socially. The goal of this court is to knock us back pre-Gideon, pre-Miranda. You guys have to be aware just how serious this is. The whole point of Gideon was that if you're ever being tried by the state for anything, it's unfair already because the state can bring lawyers, money, all this other stuff. So in order to make it so that innocent people are convicted less often, you have to be able to have competent defense. And if you can't afford it, then the state will give it to you. That is the cornerstone of any legal system genuinely concerned with justice. It sucks. I didn't like the OJ verdict. Now, that, keep in mind, was just that he had a defense team that got him off. Okay, but everybody deserves a defense. Everybody. A good one. That's the only way the system works. And yeah, sometimes people get off. We don't end up with tyranny that way. That's the only line of defense we have. They're going to roll that one back too. They're rolling all of it back. All right. Let's see. Where are we? Yeah, it was. So with him, OJ was in one instance a bad example because he didn't have a public defender. But having said that, I don't fault his defense. I don't fault his defense because having adequate defense and a genuinely good defense is the only line that we have from tyranny. That's the only thing that stops it, because here's the question. Who's going to determine who gets a lawyer and who doesn't? Who gets a competent lawyer and who doesn't? Who's going to determine that? Because the problem is, if it's going to be me, or if it's going to be you, if it's going to be just anyone looking at it, the only way you can do it is to decide whether or not the person is guilty before the trial has happened. That's the only way to do it. How many times have you thought somebody was guilty and it turned out they were innocent? Doesn't happen all that often, but it does happen. We've all seen it. If it had been left up to us whether or not they got to defend themselves, it was based on money. So what, only the rich get justice? Everybody has the right to competent defense. Everybody. And a lot of people still don't get it because public defenders aren't paid a lot. Nobody wants to do public defender work. They're often actually not paid at all. They have a statutory minimum, a maximum usually they can charge. And the state doesn't usually pay them. Depends on the state. In many states, you have to do some public defender work. Nobody wants to do it. But how else is the system going to function? All right, we're going to wrap things up. Yeah. I mean, the reality is, again, Roe v. Wade hurts. Roe v. Wade hurts a lot, and it doesn't hurt me all that much per se, personally. I mean, how much is it going to affect me? I'm married. We've got 2 kids already. How much is it really going to affect me? The answer is, me personally, not a lot. It still hurts. But there's a lot of other stuff that is now on the chopping block, and it is unbelievably serious. And they're going to talk. I mean, gerrymandering is going to be up. How do you think they're going to vote with that? I made the title for this, 50 Years of Progressive Agenda Collapses. I try to be careful. I don't like to use clickbait titles. I usually, my rule of thumb, for those of you who've watched the show at all know that my rule of thumb is as salacious as I can defensibly make the title is what I go. It's not going to be clickbait. And what I say is going to be, but it has to be defensible. That's other than that, as much attention as I can draw, sure. That's not clickbait. It's not clickbait. The Alito decision is designed to reverse it all. Whether it's going to work or not, there are people fighting it. Again, Thomas, I think there's a decent chance Clarence Thomas will be off the bench before the end of the year. How much is that going to help? It's a good question. But Thomas has now said, so for those of you just joining us, just to recap, and then we're going to wrap this up. Clarence, the Supreme Court has ruled today to overturn Roe v. Wade. You no longer have a right to an abortion in the United States. I think it was Wisconsin has now already made it illegal. There are between 13 and 18 trigger law states that will be illegal by the end of the night. Abortion will be completely illegal by the end of the business day in at least between 13 and 18 states. And we believe in up to 29 states by the end of the year. Abortion will be completely illegal. This is the cornerstone of a piece of legislation that is designed to undermine gay rights, trans rights, even the right to contraception, and even stunningly the right to same-sex relationships, and which is even farther than I had predicted. But Clarence Thomas has also published today his concurrent opinion because he thought Alito did not go far enough in saying precisely what their agenda is, and he put all of those things on the table. So it's stunning, and he has said that all of these things need to be revisited. Same-sex marriage, same-sex relationships, all of it. This is the cornerstone of the collapse and undoing of at least 50 years of progressive legislation. And I understand we all have different values, but some of these are just human rights. And the U.S. has already been seen more and more as a backward country. And we are earning that title. Thank you all for joining us. And we will keep you apprised as much as we can. We're still going to, we got to go through the decision, all that other stuff. But join us on the Discord. We're going to be discussing it on the Discord. Then that's also where we have breaking news. We can often beat mainstream news to breaking. So if you really want to stay in touch with what's going on, join us on the Discord. Help us out to participate. If you see news that you think we should be made aware of, you can do that. The link to the Discord, I think I saw Jake. I'm hoping he can drop it. If not, you will see it in the description.